So Nagarjuna we usually think of as a philosopher writing incredibly difficult and profound texts on the Madhyamaka. But he did also write a handful of short works giving practical advice to practitioners, very much on the relative level rather than necessarily the ultimate truth. And Letter to a Friend, he wrote to, well, the friend in question was a king, a Raja. And we don't know whether he was a Maharaja, some glittering oriental despot perhaps, or maybe just a local bigwig. But it's true that was some 1800 years ago, and there are huge cultural differences between us and Nagarjuna's friend. And some people find this rather a difficult text, especially since it's also very concise. It deals with the whole Bodhisattva path in just 123 verses. But I found as I was translating this work that doing a certain amount of reading between the lines and using some imagination, that I started to warm to this king, because we find Nagarjuna telling him not to look at other people's wives and not to prowl around at night, and other rather surprising pieces of advice. And eventually I realized that he's not really very different from us, despite the huge differences of culture and age. He has the same comforts, the same distractions, certainly, the same foibles and weaknesses, the same defilements. And if we view him in that light and do a certain amount of adaptation to the cultural details in some of the verses, we can really begin to relate this text to ourselves, and particularly with Kanji Rinpoche's commentary, which is quite clear but not too detailed and not too long, and the structural outline that he provides, which enables one to see how the text flows, in which direction it's going. There are enormous rewards to be had from this work, and it really does merit reading and reading again, which isn't too arduous a task to require of the reader, since it is really quite short. And I must say, it's become one of my favorite texts, and I think it's been a great favorite of Tibetan writers throughout the ages, because the wonderfully evocative images he uses in many of the verses have meant that they are quoted in an enormous number of commentaries. It's very difficult to pick up a text in Tibetan, certainly general texts dealing with the path, that don't contain quotations justifiably from this letter to a friend.